welcome to TOTO, Two Rabbis, Three Opinions. TOTO stands for Temples of Thousand Oaks, with Rabbi Barry Diamond from Adat Elohim and me, Ari Averbach from Etz Chaim. Just, how far apart are we? Like a mile and a half? I don't know.
Yeah, like a few miles. And by the way, if you notice that TOTO, Two Rabbis, Three Opinions is our updated title, because I learned that there is another podcast of Two Rabbis, Three Opinions, which I did not know because I did not do my IP research. So we are TOTO. I think it adds a lot. It ties us together.
It is. And also, I enjoyed the songs Africa and Rosanna. I mean, Toto's a great band.
That's right.
And maybe one day we'll join together with the other podcast. We'll do Four Rabbis, Six Opinions, or however that goes.
Perfect.
We're continuing to talk about Judaism in the world today, really with using Emmanuel Acho and Noah Tishby's book, Uncomfortable Conversations with a Jew, as our jumping off point. And to think about what is a Jew, what does it mean to be Jewish, whether you're Reform or conservative or something or nothing. And I used to have those surveys like to define your Judaism, and I would always click just Jewish. Like, I don't need a label on it. I'm Jewish. And then afterwards, the results would come out and they're like, it's so unfortunate the young people today all call themselves just Jewish. And I was like, yeah, that's a good thing.
Is that a bad thing? By the way, just so we know, this is chapters 2 and 3. If you are following section by section, this is chapters 2 and 3 of Uncomfortable Conversations with a Jew.
Yeah. I've got a lot of notes on these chapters. I'm rereading them. I was reminded of a time that I was talking with a friend of mine who's a church-going Christian. I believe she has a parent who's a pastor. And so she knows her stuff. And one time she called me and said, I'm so sorry that I've been calling you a Jew. I was like, what do you mean? I don't know what that means. She's like, I was told in church that that's a slur. I should be calling you a Jewish person. I was like, oh, I didn't know that. And I know other slurs. I know other, but I
didn't realize I should be offended.
Now I'm very upset, and you have to buy me some coffee. I don't know. And we both actually go speak to the local high school to talk about religion. I'm always a little thrown off because I know that Judaism is under the umbrella of religion for some reason, but Judaism, both in this book and in other books, I think specifically of Mordechai Kaplan's books, Judaism as a Civilization, that's what we are. You can't be Christian without believing in the tenets of the theology of Christianity, I believe. And if I'm wrong, let me know. And one of the parts of this book that I like is that she talked about the 4 pillars of Judaism. And one of them is observance. And so that could fall into the faith side of it. But in the same way that you've never gone to a restaurant and said, boy, this restaurant is really a Methodist restaurant. You've never seen a movie and thought that it has an Episcopal sense of humor. Whereas you can watch a movie with no Jews in it and be like, it feels Jewish. There's a Jewish sense of humor. You can go to a restaurant owned by Koreans in Iowa and it's a Jewish deli. There's a certain culture to it that is outside of the faith. We're not saying it's a Jewish deli or the movie feels Jewish because of its theology.
There are other aspects or facets to Judaism that contribute to our identity or to the larger project or definition of what it means to be Jewish and what Judaism means in general. I do like her 4 pillars. I think that's a helpful way to kind of describe.
And I think we'll break it down more. There's an analogy that I'm working on that isn't perfected yet. So anybody who wants to challenge me on it is welcome to. But imagine trying to be American when you and your family haven't lived in America for 1,000 years. How do you still act American? How do you celebrate American things? How do you understand American history when you are generations, centuries removed? And so we were a country, a culture, a peoplehood at some point, and then 2,600 years ago or 2,000 years ago, we were dispersed. And how do you hold on to this identity? And part of it might be faith, but there's some of the people in the Bible who don't seem particularly faithful, even people who have like direct relationships with the Lord, the creator of the universe, don't seem to have a faith, a religion, a spirituality around it.
I
This person is a character.
I think your analogy is an interesting one because it kind of views uh, it thinks about religion or Judaism partially as something where you become a citizen of Judaism. Again, it's not a perfect analogy because no analogy is perfect, but and that the 1,000 years piece I think adds another dimension to it. But also in terms of faith, you could be a good American and despise the Constitution or be ignorant of the Constitution and still conceivably be a good American if you follow the tenets of good citizenship or whatever it might mean.
Right.
And similarly, you can do the same in Judaism. However, I think a person is a more fully well-rounded Jew. Maybe that's even too much of a value statement. You know, if a person is a more fully well-rounded American, if they both feel a connection to the country and know the history and care about the Constitution and the rights that are preserved by it, you know, that makes a person, I think, fuller in their citizenship. And the same thing I think can be true for Judaism as well.
Right. Um, exactly. And then to think generations removed, if you called yourself American because your great 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 grandparents were, but you don't speak a lick of English and you hate baseball and apple pie, what are the parts of of Americanism in that analogy that still hold true for you? What are the parts of it that you're proud of? What are the parts that you grapple with? And so too with Judaism, that here we are 2,000 years removed from when there was a centralized Judaism. And now, what does it mean today? How do you have to pray to an invisible God? Do you have to be together as a community? Do you have to have certain recipes? I brought it up recently with our men's club. They're like gefilte fish, and I hate gefilte fish, and also to think like our biblical ancestors did not know, thank God, from gefilte fish. There is nothing about gefilte fish in any of the Bible, and it's from us being, I don't know, poor in Eastern Europe and couldn't afford a real fillet of fish that we kind of, used wood chips and glue to make a meal.
That wasn't the Red Sea. I
Is that
just
where
taught
it
me
comes
something.
from? Is like they
You
split the
just taught
sea
me
and
something important.
there you
Yeah,
go.
I
It's
assume that when it split.
always good to learn. Um, um, I, so to go through some of the book, we talked about the four pillars. I think this is a great jumping off point. Talks about the four pillars being religion, peoplehood, Tikkun Olam, which is repairing the world, social justice, something like that, and nationhood. We've made Tikkun Olam mean that. I don't know if that's what it originally means. I like it. I'll take it. I think it's important. It seems that when we in Aleinu we say letaken olam doesn't mean to save the whales. It means to get people to kind of put the pieces of the world back together because they've been shattered.
Well, I mean, but taking the Elena as an example, I mean, and she makes a point to say that we don't evangelize, except in the Aleinu, there is this hope that the world will be a believing Jewish place. Obviously, this is the rabbis who wrote this, and that's perhaps their dream. But at one level, she's right that we don't evangelize. At another level, Tikkun Olam, I think, was viewed by some of the rabbis at a certain time as being this coming together of the people around this particular belief. And in other times, it was about the mystical ideas of the brokenness of the world, the brokenness of God, and of fixing problems in Jewish law. That's another idea of Tikkun Olam. It has all these meanings, and it has this modern meaning, which I think for many Jews today feels very relevant and salient of proving the social life of the world.
Right. Right. I think that part of it is not that everybody has to be Jewish, because that's not going to happen, and that is a strange dream to have, but that people stop worshiping idols, right? Everybody believes in a God. They just might believe in the God of gold or fashion or beauty or something else. And if they're struggling after the wrong, what Judaism would call the wrong ones, then they're going to be led astray and fighting for the wrong things. And so I- let me, I'll turn it this way. When somebody comes to you and says, Rabbi Diamond, I want to become Jewish. Right. The example everybody uses is from Sex and the City, where for some reason Charlotte goes to the Orthodox rabbi who turns her away 3 times without explaining why she's being turned away, whatever. And people always ask, so do you have to turn me away? And I go, I don't have to turn you away. When somebody comes to you, what are there steps? Is there a question on how to become Jewish?
See, it's interesting because in some ways, the rabbis, that is to say, the kind of the religious authorities that developed over thousands of years, became the gatekeepers of who is a Jew. Like, you have to go through this religious conversion, and that religious conversion connects you to the covenant with Abraham and Sarah, so that you become part of that covenant. And it happens through this process, kind of like a process of naturalization, where you have to accept certain beliefs. That's not the way it always used to happen. There's part of me that thinks that it's good that it is that way, but I can see it creates a certain amount of quality control. It
Mm-hmm.
creates a certain sense of community where there's something, at least people share some level of knowledge, just because they've gone through a process of learning. But I'm not sure it's the only way that a person can or should be Jewish, even though I kind of respect that as the path that I require anyone that I preside over a conversion to go through.
Yeah. I do you know this series of books from the 60s about Rabbi David Small, and it's like murder mystery series. It's
Yes.
if you're listening to this right now, press pause, go read all of the books and come back. We'll be here. It's delightful as a piece of anthropology to see what life was like in the Jewish world in the 60s. It's not all accurate. It's not written by a rabbi. It's written by a literature professor. But I bring it up because I read one of the books recently just as a fun, easy read. And somebody asks about conversion, and the rabbi says, you don't need to convert because Judaism doesn't believe that you have to be a follower of our laws to go into heaven. And so if the righteous of any nation has the same spirituality or potentiality for an afterlife, which we don't really talk about so often, as a rabbi or the Kohen Gadol from the temple, then what do you need to convert for? And her answer in the book, in Uncomfortable Conversations, is because, well, being a Jew isn't a walk in the park, which is why it's hard to become Jewish. I go, no, we're not setting up the hurdles because being Jewish is hard or not fun or not whatever. I think it's because we want, as you were saying, we want you to know what you're getting yourself into. What does it mean? How does your life change? And so the ways of being Jewish are having Jewish parents, one or both, and that's where we can debate a little
Right.
bit, but
Right.
whatever. Having Jewish parentage or choosing Judaism. And it's strange how many people are born Jewish and do nothing with it, which is fine. They're still Jewish. When people are like, do you know what celebrity is Jewish? You go, great. Have they been to synagogue once in the last 20 years? Have they kept kosher once? Have they kept Shabbos once? Do they do any Tikkun Olam projects? No, but they're still Jewish.
Right. Or have they wrestled with the ideas that Judaism is wrestling with? So, for instance,
Right.
whether a person believes in the specifics of, you know, God to whom we must give praise on a regular basis or pray 3 times a day or whatever the particular action might be, there are ideas that are contained in those rituals, and those ideas are worth exploring. Whether we agree with them is, I think, perhaps even secondary to to exploring the wisdom that we can extract from them. And then wrestling with that wisdom and deciding what we want to incorporate into our lives. So I think for me, there's a difference between a particular belief, a particular action, and taking Judaism seriously and taking the ideas, the struggles, the wrestles within Judaism to be seriously to be serious about those things. I think that's something that is important and worthwhile. Like, what is the nature of a marriage? What does it mean to learn? What does it mean to try and understand truth? And how is argumentation, which we Jews do a lot, how is that a part of that that process for understanding truth? I think that is something that Judaism has something beautiful to say about, and I think that that's something that whatever one's belief can be, that I think is worth, at the very least, exploring, if not actually affirming.
Yeah. And this is for a different episode, but then what does it mean to have a Jewish country? It's like
Yes.
it's not based on Torah or Talmud law, aside from having a majority Jewish population, a safe place often for Jews to land, a Jewish majority government. It's not built on. But I've been there and seen people eating bacon on Shabbat in Jerusalem.
On Yom Kippur.
Right, like exactly, like all the things. And so you go, okay, so it's not what makes a person or a place or an idea a Jewish one. And so with her 4 pillars, she notes that with the first one, religiosity, there are different strains of it. Reform, conservative, Orthodox is how it's often delineated. And I wonder with the other strains, are there Reform, conservative, and Orthodox? Can you be machmir? Can you be really strict about keeping kosher, but really makil, really lax about peoplehood? In the same way that there are people who in American politics they often say fiscally conservative, but socially liberal or something. And so it's not just 2 strains. There are multiple strains in each of the different pillars. What does it mean to be really, and so some communities are really machmir, are really strict on Tikkun Olam. That's the basis for their Judaism, but can we see them as, like, they're not reform or something because they're Judaism light. They're taking certain parts of it really, really seriously. And you look at other communities that are ultra Orthodox, that they follow the letter of the law exactly, but they are very lenient on Tikkun Olam or welcoming or whatever it is, some other aspect of that we find to hold important for Judaism.
Well, and also these ideas of the different strains within Judaism, the different movements within Judaism, they all have their place where they grew out of. And she talks about, orthodoxy and reform growing out of orthodoxy as a desire to fit into the modern world and to retain Jews who look at modern life, modernity, and they just go, "This is awesome. I'm leaving all this other stuff behind," and to try and take the service and shorten it and make it feel. It started with aesthetics. We want our service to have the beauty of Bach. And later, conservative Judaism grew out of the Reform movement, at least in America, during the famous Treif banquet.
I have the
the
menu
Treif
behind
banquet?
me. Yeah.
Do you really?
Yeah.
So
It's like
what this is,
every course of this meal is treif. It's like frog's legs followed by, I mean, it's like just somebody said, I wonder if they like purposely put flies in the water to make sure the water wasn't even kosher. Like every course.
So just so we know, in like
95,
1875
whatever,
or so,
75.
the Hebrew Union College, the Reform movement, started itself, and then it had its first graduating class in America. I mean, this, American born students. It was a very exciting thing. This is in Cincinnati, Ohio, which was the gateway to the West at the time, and the people who organized the dinner had a banquet that couldn't have been more unkosher.
Right.
And
This is
became,
July
yeah, go ahead.
12th, 1883. It's clams, it's shrimp, sweetbreads. I don't know the kashrut of sweetbreads. I don't know if I want to know the kashrut of sweetbreads. That's okay. It's frog's legs. It's cauliflower, which now the Orthodox won't eat. But it's just like every course of this very fancy dinner is treif. And that's right. That's the beginning of the conservative movement going, we are all for reforming Judaism because it doesn't make sense for it to be this old school, everything in Hebrew, even though people don't understand Hebrew. But at the same time, we need to conserve what makes us Jewish. Otherwise, we're just people who are hoping to bring goodness into the world instead of having a religious basis for it. Anyway, so it made the split.
And the thing that conservative Jews said, the thing that makes Judaism unique is the Jewish legal system. So we're going to keep the Jewish legal system. We're not going to throw it all out. We'll update it, but that legal system is one of the things that distinguishes Jews from other religious groups. And I think that's beautiful, even though I don't follow that. I think it's a beautiful and a clear idea.
Yeah. I mean, I also don't like when she or anybody, this is not her, describes conservative Judaism as the middle path. She talks about it as the mediator between the divorced parents of Reform and Orthodox, or some like creative way to explain it. I don't see us as the middle path. I see us as a path.
Well, that the way to describe it is crazy, hazy, and lazy.
Right. And we're hazy, except that I think that most of our congregants aren't conservative Jews. I mean, she explains it as they follow the laws of the CJLS, the Committee of Jewish Laws and Standards, by the USCJ, United Synagogue Conservative Judaism. Like all these letters. And most of our people don't and aren't aware of that and don't care about that. I like that that's where it is based halachically, but most of our people are like me before I had to choose a movement are Jews.
Yeah.
They're Jews. And how lovely. And we try to do what makes sense for us. And who knows if, you're right, 150 years ago, they couldn't have imagined that there's 3 definitive movements with other smaller ones popping up here and there. Who knows if 100 years from now, these two have merged and those two have separated and there's things that we've never heard of before that are now like the mainstream.
And by the way, we also kind of view Orthodoxy as a homogenous group,
right.
And it's really different. There are very different understandings of Judaism and God between the mystics and the Hasidim and the Mitnagdim, those who are against the Hasidim. That there is a lot of disagreement within quote Orthodox Judaism from before.
And geographic, right? A Litvak Jew is different than a Galicianer Jew, which is different than a Moroccan or a Persian or and so all of it is, and one of my wife's favorite things was in Jerusalem on Purim. There were 2 groups of like ultra Orthodox. You could picture what they look like and how they dress. But on Purim, these who only wear white socks, they wear the black suit and the white shirt and the black shoes and the certain hat, but they wear white socks. They on Purim would wear black socks. And it's like, for them, it's as hilarious as me going in drag. I mean, like just like whatever you can think of as an extreme. It's like, oh my gosh, can you believe that Shmuley wore black
Well, but
socks for work.
in a certain sense, every modern Jewish group, and really every group, is responding to the challenges of modern life, modern ideas, the Enlightenment of the
Yeah,
1700s and the 1800s, and science and
right.
philosophy. Like, we're all dealing with these things. And even if we as modern Jews or the people in these discussions don't realize it, we're all in dialogue with these discussions. For instance, do I have the right to simply choose what I want to be and who I want to be and how I want to be? Like, can I just make a faith statement and choose which group I'm in? Is it all about me as an individual? Is it about me as a community? What does it mean to do a good act versus an act which follows the rule? Is there a difference between those things? Like, these are all ideas that had their roots perhaps in Greek philosophy and before, but certainly came to relief again in this the modern period that we're living in now.
Yeah. I also think about the fact that even Orthodox Jews are Judaism has been reformed in each generation, right? What they are doing, even the most extreme Orthodox saying this comes from me Sinai, from Mount Sinai, are doing Judaism in a way that is it's evolved over time. If a Jew is in mourning, if an Orthodox Jew is in mourning and they say mourner's Kaddish, that's a new-ish reformation of Judaism, because that's not. I mean, it's
They didn't
Aramaic.
do that
It's
in the
not in the
Bible.
Torah. They didn't do that in the Bible, and in fact, that wasn't even the way to show that you were in mourning back then. And if you have an aliyah, if you say the blessing, if you say those blessings, even if you say the traditional Hebrew blessings that go back very far, that's a new idea. It was that one person read from the Torah, and in fact, before that, it was the whole community gets together on Sukkot and listens to the Torah every 7 years. We keep on reforming it because the world changes, right? The temple has been destroyed. You can't even do most of the commandments in the Torah anymore.
It's
Um,
hard to get a mourner to wear sackcloth and ashes these days. I've encouraged them, and they just won't do it.
yeah, Target sells the ashes, but not the sackcloth. You have to go
Really?
to.
Okay. Okay.
It's
Well, that's
really
good to
hard,
know.
right, to do
Yeah.
this. I mean, right? We rip a ribbon now instead of
Right.
literally ripping our clothes. Um,
Right.
one of the lines of hers that I really liked, from, if you're following in the book in the same version that I have, it's page 17 in the middle. She says, Judaism in its most observant form is essentially an obsessive compulsive version of an awareness and gratitude practice. And aside from the fact that I don't love that she says obsessive compulsive for a couple of reasons, but it is. I think that this Judaism is about how do you live in the present with gratitude. How do you, before you eat, think about what you're eating and say a blessing, saying, thank you, universe, we'll call it God for this moment, for the fact that there is ample food to eat for all the people on the planet right now, whether or not it's being distributed properly, but I have food to eat. Thank you, God, that somehow we take grapes off of the vine and some old lady squishes it with her feet, and I don't know what happens after that with an oak barrel or something, and now I get to drink wine. How incredible this all is. And what would it mean if, when you wake up in the morning, atheist, Jew, any religion, doesn't matter, you wake up and you go, I'm so appreciative that I have another day. And you use the restroom and you go, can you believe bodies don't always work? My body's working right now. And if for everything that what would it mean to the tradition is 100 blessings a day? What would it mean if, for anybody, tell the high school students who aren't Jewish, write down 100 things today that you are grateful for. And that seems to be the basis of Judaism. Can you be aware at every step of what you're doing that this is wonderful, that this is a blessing?
Yeah, I think that's beautiful. I mean, the part that the rabbis would kind of require us to add is that you have to mention God's name and that God's the ruler. Like, those are key ideas
Yeah.
in the way that Judaism understands God. One of the ways that Judaism understands God, because Judaism understands God in many different ways. And that's part of the practice is saying, blessed are you, Adonai, God's name, Eloheinu, our God, Melech HaOlam, ruler of the world. God's name and the fact that God's ruler is central, which I think is an important thing to look at. But I think that the part that you're mentioning, the fact that it is a practice that brings us into a level of awareness, I think is just a beautiful, both modern and ancient idea that is, it's wonderful that we can have that woven into our lives today.
And you get to talk to this ruler of the universe. Like, imagine you get a moment with whatever it is that created the universe. Like, if the Big Bang were in front of you and you get to say, thank you, Big Bang universe, whoever created this mishmash, thank you for the fact that I have another day. Thank you for the fact that I have food to eat, right? So to notice the sovereignty of the fact that there is a universe, even a chaotic one. And there's something to having this moment, taking a break every little bit to go.
So, Ari, let me ask you this question, because there's another movement that she didn't talk about, and it's a very small movement. There's a Jewish humanist movement, among others, which basically says we care about Jewish culture. We leave the question of God out, and we keep the rest. Some people have talked about it, like I think Milton Steinberg talks about cut flower ethics. Like, you can take flowers, you can cut it from the roots, and the flowers will remain for a while, but soon they will wilt. Some people say if you remove Judaism from the roots of Jewish faith and belief, that it will also wilt. So you get a movement like the Jewish humanist movement. Like, what would you say to someone who says, this is the movement I resonate with? Would you argue with them, against them? Would you support them? I'm just curious as to how you might.
If they argue that the Jewish humanist side is what they resonate with.
Yeah.
I think the word for observance or the laws that we follow is halacha, which really means a path. It's your way. It's how you go about your life. I disagree with most people's observance and halacha and how they understand. And it's neat that they have it. They've thought about it. Right. These last 2 years, especially, it's been really confusing when people have a certain connection to Judaism or God or Israel that I find to be not just different than mine, but like anathema, like really problematic. And is that really is this the humanist side, the basis of it? And everything else grew from that. And so if that's how they find it, to go, this started because God said to Abraham and Sarah, Lech lecha me'artzecha, go and be a blessing. And if you go, I'm going to live Judaism by being a blessing. I'm going to be a humanist. I'm going to go into the world and bring blessings into the world. And that's it. Would we be okay with that version of Judaism? And if that won out, I could swallow that.
Yeah, I guess, for me, I find some beauty, and I know many have as well, as you mentioned, Mordechai Kaplan, who at one time in his life, his idea of God was more kind of naturalistic, as though it's like part of the universe or the force that leads to redemption, whatever that means exactly. But that we're also, bottom line, we are a culture. We're a civil. He called it a civilization, but in some ways, he kind of hints at the idea of it being like a culture, ethnic cultures, in the way that she talks about, like, we're a group of people who come together. We have a shared history. The shared history has certainly God at the center of the history, but not that's not the only thing at the center. It also has the fact that we were a nation, and that we had a shared space as part of it, and we had power and struggled with that power, and we're also displaced. Like all of that history and our reaction to that history is part of what creates us today. So that whatever part of those four pieces that one focuses on, um, it's still all part of what it means to be part of the Jewish peoplehood. The idea of I mean, this is something that Islam has, ummah, for Islam, that Judaism has this idea that we are this people, this, whether it's the term nation, whether we are both a goy, whatever a nation means, we are an we're a people, whatever those specific ideas mean. But there's something that brings us together and that ties us together in the same way that modern nationalism is this idea that you can have lots of different people who live in the same place, and that they can have a shared identity, right? You can be an American and you can be different colors, you could have different beliefs, and you could still be an American. We know that is imperfect in its execution, but that's something that we still aspire to. And that idea of nationhood is something that Kaplan talked about, and I think it's really kind of a beautiful and interesting idea that the humanist movement may emphasize to a different degree, and the reform movement also emphasizes to a different extent. So I think each of these movements, each of these relationships with theology, Jewish practice, community, nationhood, peoplehood, I think gives us a number of places where we could land within the Jewish orbit,
Yeah.
and that each of our movements kind of has a constellation of those beliefs, and we can find our way with it. Even when a Reformed Jew, one of the past president of our congregation, wears tzitzit, the fringes, the tassels. He wears a talit katan, the kind of a talit that you don't wear just during a service, but during the day. And he walks to synagogue, and he walks home
Yeah.
on Shabbat. And he's pretty observant. And he used to not use electronics on Shabbat, but he's a doctor. He has to know if someone's ill, and he was kind of stuck at home for a period of time. So he started using Zoom in order to be a part of Torah study. So it's like he's Reformed Jew, fairly religious, and also continuing to make adjustments along the way.
Yeah. And right. And that's wonderful. And I've talked to his family going like, what if he comes here, like not for services, like just for the certain holidays that we do that you don't, we could share certain things. One of the places that I struggle is, what does it mean today to be a cultural Jew? One of the lines that I like the least in her book is, she says in one of these chapters right here, when you meet a Jew, you tend to know that you've met a Jew. I go,
Yeah.
what? What do you mean? And like, this is in the middle of her saying there are Jews who are black, who are white, who are Asian, who are Indian, and so how would you know? And a generation ago, or however many generations ago, I think it was easier because most Jews had a Jewish accent. There was a tinge of Yiddish to it. And now we live in a world where a lot of people who aren't Jewish speak know the same amount of Yiddish words that I do. And most of the Jewish people I know I don't know what it means to be culturally Jewish anymore.
Yeah. And I think it's damaging in another sense, is that, later we'll be talking about kind of anti-Semitism and Zionism. And, is this just the Jews of Europe, the Ashkenazic Jews of Europe, who are coming to take over another place? And the fact is, no, it's like we feel like we know a Jew because we see someone who is from Russia or Ukraine or maybe Hungary, but who is still part of the Ashkenazic Jewish fabric. But there aren't just two kinds of Jews. There aren't just Ashkenazic Jews from Western Europe or Eastern Europe, and Sephardic Jews from Spain and other areas. There are many. There are other kinds as well, and we forget them. And I feel like, and I know that she's being kind of cute in what she was saying, but I think that it misses the diversity within Jewish life in general.
Yeah. Right. Growing up, I knew that somebody with the name Barbara Streisand or Steven Spielberg was Jewish. I didn't know that Vidal Sassoon is a pretty common Jewish name. And I
Yeah.
brought it up to my high school kids. They go, "Who's Vidal Sassoon?" I'm like, every commercial in the 90s was for the hair care product. I don't know. But right. And so to not know what a Jewish name, a Jewish culture, we just had people over last night who are, I think, Moroccan, and they were talking about different recipes. I was like, oh, I like that one. I've never heard of that one, because for them, it's deeply Jewish. And for me, it's foreign, which is also great because there's some really wonderful food out there. But right, one of her lines, I think celebrating our unique culture is important. I thought, like, what is culture? And she admits in the book that she doesn't do any formal Jewish education. And I go, okay, so what's the culture that we are passing to our children or to the community, or what is it? I'm trying to, not because of the podcast, not because of the book, but it's something I've been struggling with, is when people say I'm culturally Jewish.
Yeah.
What pieces of the culture are Jewish, and what pieces were culturally American? And hopefully we would imagine that American culture is similar to Jewish culture in the way that we believe, we call it Tikkun Olam. They might call it being a good citizen. And so if you help that lady cross the street or whatever, that's a mitzvah, or that's the right thing to do. That's a true American thing to do.
Yeah, I appreciate the question, and I think that there are things that pervade Judaism. One thing I think that pervades Judaism is study as a way to kind of excel and understand the world. Not that every Jew studies, but that's still something that is held as valuable. I think that since Israel has come back, that being strong, which is not unique to Judaism, is something that has been recovered within a Jewish history and culture that I think had been lost for over the centuries. But I do think that those are some things that are shared amongst the Jewish communities of the world. That's one area where I think we have a shared culture. I certainly don't think that, bagels or, kishke
Right.
or, that.
Right. Nobody eats kishka and everybody eats bagel.
Yeah. And the other thing is, when we talk about Tikkun Olam as being central to Judaism, at a certain level, it is. I mean, caring for the poor and the disenfranchised. I mean, it's just so clear in Torah. But some of the values that we have as American Jews, I think, are kind of American Enlightenment values that we describe as being Jewish, that are woven into Judaism by for instance, the use of Tikkun Olam as helping to improve the world in some way, in a larger way. But I think part of it is also because in America, our fight for minority rights is a way for us to protect ourselves as well. We have an idea from the world around us, and it gets absorbed into Jewish thought, and hopefully those ideas can strengthen us. And I do believe in the importance of protecting the rights of minorities and other Enlightenment thinking for a disagreement and a free press and different parts of society critiquing one another. So those are things that I affirm.
Yeah. I mean, look, this is, I think, the center of Torah, right? How many times it says that we must protect the orphan, the widow, the stranger, the hungry, all of this. And I believe it fully. And one thing that we've been struggling with here recently is, how do you do this when you are drowning? When you are barely surviving, when you're on the front lines of every minority rights group to protest on their behalf, and then when you need them most because the world is out to get you, they turn their back on you and say, you are monsters, you are genocidal. It's a really hard one. And to go, and there, I know there's like a lot to unpack in there that we're not going to get to do here, but
Yeah,
it's,
I think next time we're going to be doing that, the next
yeah,
episode, I believe. Yeah.
which is a great cliffhanger. But it's one of the places that even our most Tikkun Olam based Jews in our community and beyond are struggling with, is how do you show up for those who most need us when they refuse, some of them, not all of them, et cetera, but when they refuse to show up for you.
It's something that Rachel Holtzman talked about in our previous podcast, when she says, like, the thing that you could do the most is to show up for others. That's the thing that keeps us safest. And I have believed that. And there's part of me that still does believe it. I question it a little more than I did 10 years ago. And that's, there's part of me that wants to strengthen the fabric of the Jewish community. And then once we rebuild the trust that we need within our own community, that we devote ourselves to creating strong connections with other people within our society. And I think that this book, and the work that Emmanuel Acho is doing, is inspiring to me. First, inspiring to kind of go inward to Judaism and to strengthen the Jewish community fabric, but also not to stop there by any means, to go out and to have and be able to have uncomfortable conversations with other members within, our co-religionists and in other religious groups and non-religious groups. That's something that I think is extraordinarily powerful and important. I mean, that's why we both are part of our local interfaith association, because we do believe in that kind of dialogue. But I certainly have been chastened over the past few years, as I think many have.
Right. And do you also, like, at what point do you go, our job is to show up for others, even if they don't show up for us, even if they call us genocidal murderers, even if they call us racist, our job is to show up for those who need us. And if they are pushing us away, that's ours to grapple with. Our job is to show up. And there's some of that too.
Yeah. I think that's a good thing for us to struggle with. And I think there are people who are partners that we should show up with and for. And then figure out, how do we deal with the people who not just are critical, because I think criticism is good, but are undermining. And a deep sense of undermining is I feel differently about it. And that's something that we're going to have to struggle with and talk about over our future meetings together.
Yeah. And I think that's the point of this conversation, an ongoing conversation, why people join communities, is to be able to have uncomfortable conversations with each other.
Yeah, boy, hard to have these days. Yeah.
But important. Well, thank you, Rabbi Diamond, for sharing your time today. So nice to get to see you and to talk to you and to bounce ideas. We'll, I think next time we get into kind of, are Jews white? What's our relationship with other communities? All this kind of stuff.
Yeah, race and anti-Semitism and the like, and it's something that I'm really looking forward to. Yeah, absolutely. It's great to talk to you as well, and looking forward to the next time we can get together.
All right, be well, everybody. Shalom.
You've been listening to Two Rabbis, Three Opinions, a joint production of Temple Adat Elohim and Temple Etz Chaim, the Temples of Thousand Oaks. If you'd like to learn more about our congregations or continue the conversation, visit adatelohim.org or templeetzchaim.org. Because when there are two rabbis, the third opinion is yours.